back to Freddy versus Jason versus Ash book that you just is like when you said books, I imagine you were talking about the Black Flame, but
no, all good.
So the Nightmare Warriors is you do set up the whole notion of the Avengers of horror, at least in the sense of Nightmare characters and Friday characters. You have Tommy Jarvis, you have Alice, you have you have Stephanie, you have Jacob Johnson, you have a couple other characters. You even bring back, I believe, Neil Gordon.
Yes, I love that. In fact, oddly enough, I just watched about a half an hour of Body Double last night because it was $6.99 on iTunes last week. So I picked up the Craig Wasson's other excellent. I always liked that character. Dream Warriors. I love. That's not exclusive.
Yeah, in hindsight, the Dream Powers I kind of like hope that they kind of like expand more of, especially if you just watch.
That was why it was in a lot. Again, it's not an accident that this book was the Nightmare Warriors.
Yeah,
and it's not an accident that a bunch of stuff established really in 3 and a little more, also in 4 at some level. But I love 3. It's those those are very intentional. It's to the point that also like. The end of the book is quite literal because you got to remember the whole point is that you're trying to tie. I knew wrapping my thing up, right? So if Freddy versus Jason is part 1 of the versus sort of end of their 2 series, and the other thing you got to remember with Ash is that the Necronomicon is in
Jason Goes to Hell,
so it was already right. So it was already in there as a natural story in for people to join those worlds. So. Because of all of that, and because I'm like, at the time, you don't know that Ash is ever going to have a show on Stars or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I have this, it's like, okay, I'm in this unique situation where I get to come up with a story to try to, tie them all up. That was, I think, one of those situations where, at the time we tried to compare it. I don't know if you ever, how much you read comic-wise outside of this, but there was an event as a kid, when I was a kid, that was really kind of the mother of them, called Crisis on Infinite Earths. And so the idea was to kind of do a crisis level story, and you can't do crisis level if it's they're killing kids in Springwood or Crystal Lake. So I'm totally cool if it's divisive. I kind of dig that in this case, but I think also like there's enough there, fan service wise, that I feel like there's got to you'll find something in it for you.
Now, one of the things that always struck me weirdly was the writing of Kat Kruger or Catherine.
I agree. It's my biggest issue with the book, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, is that essentially Kat? Yeah, like Kat.
The turn. I agree. The turn is not well executed, and it just is one of those like. It's what I'd love to like. It's weird. Like with Booster Gold, we're in a situation where Jeff Johns and I would literally be like, "You're going to take these 15 pages or whatever, 12 pages. I'm going to take these 12." In this case, you're writing a story, a treatment, and having it adapted, and then I can give some notes, but it's a slightly different process. Yeah, I think James at some level would probably agree that like that is the thing that probably needed the most TLC that didn't get it in terms of managing the character, because the idea was more of a subtle, like as written originally, the idea was much more of a longer term sort of mental game having been played to where her ultimate breaking would have been a bit more, something would have been, in a movie, it would be much clearer something was a little off.
Yeah.
Before the actual turn. It's what it is. I can't argue with you.
Yeah, it's like the most weirdest thing is that, you have Freddy Krueger and he essentially, and the most like this, like you would think is like, how could Freddy Krueger top being as disgusting as he could, as disgusting as he could? And then you get to the point where he's able to essentially seduce his own daughter into helping him.
See, that's not, again, like that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's not what, at least in terms of the treatment, what the idea was. So one of those things where if I had it to do over and had a little bit more like, hey, yes, no, I would do it.
Like, and aside from the daughter thing, I could legitimately see Freddy Krueger seducing someone into helping him, and it's not very far of him to actually do that.
Yeah, I don't think the idea wasn't that he like slept with his daughter. To be clear, she's in like a really like kind of, there's like that weird creepy panel, if I remember correctly. And again, to be clear, I haven't looked at it in fucking years.
Yeah.
But if I know what you're talking about, because I remember it. Because I remember the time being like, no, that's not what I meant. But again, there's certain things you can control, certain things you can't.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So, and I would imagine like, and this is something I talked to previously with Jeff Farber, who wrote. I mean, who wrote for DC and is the exec producer for Supergirl. And I mentioned like, trying to write a thing and then the editor being like, oh, I imagine like
one of the necessarily the editor. It's not your pencils could come in differently. They could be in the case of the second book. We had a lot of issues getting art in on time, so they had to come in and bring in a couple other extra guys to fill in. It was a real issue. And so I think that probably was the real. I have to go back and look at the panel to tell you if it was the original artist or not. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was a case where just the extra artist, the guest artist, because I think there were 2 or 3, read it one way and interpreted it, and that's how they put it. Because the first book was the same art throughout. And the second, I don't remember what happened. He ran into some family issues or something, and they ended up having to, about halfway through, bring in some people to make up the stuff that wasn't in. So that's my guess, but I'd have to look at it again.
Now, speaking of art, I will say that the Jason human element thing that comes into play, where he does look like he has like a normal face and whatnot, it actually does look pretty impressive considering it's supposed to be a necromantic spell and whatnot. When that was coming up, did you figure out, have Freddy cast some spell to make Jason look normal? Was that just like
that was in the treatment originally? The promise of normalizing him was, I actually have to go and find like the original treatment I have up on my like bookcase still. The second one, because that was just from the movie. The second one, I actually have to go through my emails and find it. I actually would love to go back and reread it because I have not looked at any. I'm weird. Like I don't watch every now and then. Like I don't have cable really anymore. I get it for football season. That's about it.
Yeah.
So I have Sling right now just for like a Red Zone channel. But like back in the day, I'd flip through it if like on TNT or TBS. If like Snakes on a Plane or Shoot 'Em Up would be on USA at one point. Like I'll watch it for like a minute or two. But I don't really, once a movie's done, I go opening weekend and I theater hop and watch like 10 or 15 minutes of it with audiences and different parts just because I love that experience. And then I never watch it again. I'm really weird. I haven't read Booster Gold since it came out, and that's been pretty well regarded. I have not looked at I did a signing before I moved to New York for the FVJ VA comics. So I looked at those for the first time in a while, but it's really weird. I just don't, there are people I know who certainly get off on it. I just am not that guy. All I see is the stuff that drives me crazy. I see I hate that ADR, or I hate that guy, or that's the CG looks terrible. That's the shit that it drives me up the wall, so I can't do it. But listen, it's as someone who grew up as a fan of all of this shit, and I mean, again, you're a fan of it, so you get it. Like to get to go and end up in a situation where, at 8 years old, I'm writing the head of the Nightmare on Elm Street studio to maybe get to someday make an Elm Street movie, and the next thing I know, I'm being made as a made man on Freddy vs. Jason. And then my sequel incorporating Ash and my old next door neighbor, Sam Raimi, becomes a thing. And then, I get to do another sequel to that. And now I get to use Tommy Jarvis, a character I love. And I get to kill off Alice. I get to it's fucking crazy. And so I'm just very, the idea that these things are out in the world and that like I came late to the idea. I had no idea that like on YouTube, if you search Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, there's a ton of shit.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Okay, up until a few years, I would keep getting an email from somebody, and then someone sent me, "Hey, there's a again another one of those like top 10 things that haven't been that almost got made but didn't or whatever." And then next thing I said, I'll take a flyer and go search. There's a ton of stuff. People like animated the comics, all sorts of shit. So to me, that's a thrill. But also, like, I do think that eventually what you might see, depending in terms of guys being alive, is it maybe eventually going to be animated as like an HBO Max thing.
Yeah.
That I could see happening. Because I think there's enough mutual business being done.
Oh yeah, and the sad fact that there hasn't been a Freddy movie or Jason movie in essentially over 10 years.
Well, the rights are all fucked up. Yeah. I believe because this would be sequelizing the. If I'm not mistaken, I think they could technically adapt, and I believe I'd have to because I have to talk to Warner Brothers Business Affairs, but I think there's a way to be able to do the existing comic probably as an animated still.
Yeah. Now,
anyway,
with the advantages of how, because superhero mediums now is very everywhere. You know, you have Avengers, you have DC, you have Marvel doing their.
It's very, very oversaturated. I
yeah.
Now, if you had told me as a kid this would be the case and I would be sick of it, I would have laughed at you. And now I'm really sick of it. So
yeah, but do you think that if the Freddy vs. Jason versus Ash comic was adapted into like a 2-hour animated film or half an hour animated film, I'm not sure how animated.
90-minute.
Yeah, 90-minute thing. Would they still adapt? Would they essentially go through the best parts, or would they just go through the entire comic because it fits essentially 90 minutes overall?
I mean, I don't fucking know. I think the idea probably would be that you have the original treatment. The original treatment was successfully turned into a comic and sequelized. So my guess is probably take the original treatment and just have someone adapt it. But I don't know. I mean, it's Hollywood. They could come in and say they want to make it into a musical for China. You know, it's a stupid business and getting stupider by the day.
But yeah, I think that's as much as I could ask about Freddy vs. Jason, especially with the.
I mean, I think would you like if you look at comics, you look at like DC really quick. DC Comics puts out. I haven't even seen them. I just know from looking at iTunes because that's where I build my movie collection. They just put out. I think they did Batman: The Long Halloween. They do a bunch of animated cast, right? With some names. Yeah. So there's no way that if you did Freddy Jason versus Ash with Bruce and Robert in that format, like that would make money. There's no way.
And I imagine, whatchamacallit, Mortal Kombat is doing the same thing, similarly with their own version of like rated R movies. I mean, not rated R movies itself, but rated R animated movies. So I imagine like more adult theme R rated.
That as well. Okay.
Huh? What happened?
You're breaking up a little bit. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. That might have been.
There you go.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I imagine nowadays to do a adult themed rated R comic, a rated R animated movie would be quite easy because you can do a lot.
All the time. They do them all the time. They just, again, you're doing it for DVD. The world's changed, so you put these things out on streaming, and you know it's just the audience would go insane.
Now, here's a good question though. Would you prefer it to be a 90-minute movie or a 6-episode cartoon thing akin to like Invincible?
No, I think you're probably better off just doing it as a straight 90. The DC Direct model seems to be successful for them, and to me, given that this is technically within the DC family through Wildstorm, which has been absorbed since, obviously in partnership with Dynamite.
Yeah.
I think that you, again, like if you wanted to make it for something to fans to binge after they watch the either Fridays or the Nightmares, they just do Freddy versus Jason. Why would you fuck with the format? I think keep it simple, stupid is one of my favorite philosophies. I learned it in like 8th grade or sixth or somewhere in middle school. And I think it's the right way to go with this. Don't overthink it.
Oh yeah. Now you mentioned the Halloween before, and you were going to do. I looked it up last night. I think it's called the Mark of Thor comic or something along like that. Was that your original intention to do a?
I did. No, I actually. That's right. I did get asked to do a Halloween thing. I don't remember what that's. I hadn't thought about that in years. But no, that was a separate thing that I got. And I haven't thought of that in years. Wow, that's crazy. So yes, that was a separate thing. We tried. I love all of these movies. I grew up on all of them. I think clearly you've had 2 of these conversations with me. Like clearly, I'm not fake. I do know.
Yeah. You know your shit.
Not the same today. I can't tell you about The Conjuring or any of that shit. Like I just might have friends who work on it, but like I just don't. I know my power zone.
Yeah.
And so Halloween is firmly in my power zone. I did think the last movie was pretty overrated. I had a lot of issues with it, but I love Malik, who's a great guy, and I love Michael Myers, and I just love. And to be honest, Michael was the one who always scared me the most.
Oh yeah,
because it's just the blank face and the emptiness of it. If Freddy was campy by the end, Jason's kills were over the top by the end. Michael was always kind of, even in the lesser movies,
consistent.
Yes, it's kind of this. You could project a lot into that William Shatner mask, and so always loved the character. Always want to do something with him. And so what we talked about doing, and what's ironic is at one point David Gordon Green and I talked about doing a horror movie at New Line because he was always interested in doing horror stuff, and I like David a lot. Was to try to do. I love revenge movies. I'm a big fan of. I love old Mike Hodges. I love Get Carter. I love The Liony. I love all that shit. So what we talked about doing, and that Bob and Toby were on board if we gotten the rights. And again, the Weinsteins always played this game. They did it multiple times. As Malik will be, I'm sure, happy to tell anybody now that he's no longer there. Where they would like tease that they would let it go, and then at the last second find the way to keep it. So what we were going to do had we gotten it was basically do a movie where we know that like, you know, one of my issues with the last movie was getting rid of the brother and sister shit, because like otherwise what is she afraid of? This thing happened fucking 40 years ago. Why does she think he's coming back if you get rid of Halloween 2 and the family connection? Like, are you crazy? Why does the town think he's coming back after 40 years? Why is he like, a lot of this stuff makes no sense whatsoever. And so going back at that point, the family dynamic was a really essential part of Halloween. And so in the same way that like Michael Myers was obviously the very bad seed and then some to Laurie Strode's good seed, so to speak, I love Donald Pleasance. I love his Halloween work, his non-Halloween work. I'm a big fan of him as an actor. The idea was that, okay, Donald Pleasance, who is dead at this point, obviously, was the good seed in his family. He was, you know, Dr. Loomis. He tried to help people. He tried to redeem Michael Myers. And part of the reason he tried to redeem Michael Myers was because he came from a family with its own bad seed. And the bad seed would have been ideally Terrence Stamp was who we wanted.
No, really?
And that guy, Terrence Stamp, was going to get out of prison after many years. And as this one, for being a very bad guy, not sure necessarily what, but had hurt people. And basically, in his one act of redemption, was going to go try to finish off his brother's great white whale.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Halloween, and you still would have had a group of kids caught in the middle. And that would have been part of his ultimate redemption, probably with him still dying to take out Michael, most likely, but you don't know for sure. But the idea of having a replacement Loomis figure who's a bad motherfucker in a way that like Terrence Stamp or maybe a Brian Cox back there, like a cool, different type of thing to where it would have just been a very, because my big thing was always like, we've seen the virginal whatever so many times. Like,
Yeah.
we've seen this. And there's a reason why we wanted to bring in Ash was let's have a good guy. If we're going to kill them, the only way fans will ever accept them being killed is by someone they respect. And they respect Ash. And so this was an idea of like, you know, you're not going to kill off Mike, who's going to come back eventually, I'm sure. But it would have just given you a totally different dynamic. It would have been the first one of these movies, I think, to have been. It's like in Jason 4, in Friday 4, in the final chapter, the brother character who's coming to hunt Jason. I always loved that bit in that movie.
Yeah.
I always thought that was cool.
Oh my God, he's killing me. He's actually.
I love that. It fucked me up. But I love that as a character.
Yeah.
And the only thing that interests me about the new Halloween is I know Anthony Michael Hall a little bit socially. And I love the idea of him like going for revenge, although I'm sure he's going to get killed. But like, yeah, I would have like cigarette smoking Terrence Stamp coming back to lay some traps, and on Halloween try to lure Michael back to fucking finish him off. I think could have been interesting.
Now that was now would that be the same thing from the comic or the comic?
No, I don't even remember what the comic I think had like, I don't remember what the assignment was. It's been so long. No, this was the comic. I was already at Fox at this point. This was back when I was at New Line trying to get it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having a little problem with my. So yes, when you were finishing up at New Line, you did 2 last films, which were Snakes on a Plane and Shoot 'Em Up, right? Or did you do more?
I did also a movie called Normal Adolescent Behavior that's on like Lifetime and HBO Max occasionally. Yes.
Huh. I very vividly remember Snakes on a Plane being essentially, if not one of the first meme movies, because you know there was like it was originally going to be like this very generic title, and then Samuel L. Jackson came in and saved the movie. Because
no, incorrect. It was originally Snakes on a Plane. They were going to try to change the title. The urban legend is that Sam came in and said that originally his team was not sure on the title, but ultimately, Sam, of course, we all figured that no, it's
no.
They tried to change it to Pacific Air Flight 120, which is terrible. But it was an awesome thing to get to be a part of. It's in the Museum of Modern Art's permanent collection. It was, you know, spoofed at the Oscars. Kanye put it in the song and won a Grammy. So like that's another one where like it continues to get referenced. I got sent a thing. What happened? Something in politics. Within the last couple of months, somebody sent me a thing. I'm trying to remember what happened, but it was Snakes on a Plane caption. So it's, and that's kind of my point about all this. Like I've been really lucky to get to do some of these things that like, you know, it's still referenced. It's because like a lot of times in movies it's a weird business. You go make something, it could cost $100 million and it comes out opening weekend and it's like a wet fart and no one ever thinks about it again, you know? When was the last time you thought about, I'm trying to give an example. The Bruce Willis movie Surrogates.
Oddly enough, maybe a couple of months ago, either a couple of months ago or just a few weeks ago, because I was just watching a movie about, not movie, but like a review of all these recent Bruce Willis movies that he's
made. Have you not been spurred by seeing it mentioned or whatever?
Yeah.
Right? It's not something that's popped into your mind, is it?
No, not really.
Right. So that movie, I'm sure, cost, you know, $60 million. It was like, imagine going, and it's not a knock on anybody. I liked the comic, as a matter of fact. That's why it came to mind. But like, you know, it's imagine going and working on that and like having it just disappear into the ether, kind of. Not to say I'm sure there are hardcore Surrogates fans out there. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but like, but are there? Even like Shoot 'Em Up underperformed theatrically, but like it did a great cable run. And even like I got sent an article, the Aerosmith, they watch it before they go on stage all the time, apparently. Like that's fucking cool. Like that's crazy. Joe Perry wrote some article about it. So that's kind of my thing, man, is like I always tried to do the job with the idea that I tried to make stuff that could get me fired. Because it meant that you were at least taking some risk. And I look back at that and it's like, I didn't make high art. And even the stuff I'm going to go this movie for Sony now coming out, like it's not high art, but I get a kick out of the fact that there are still people like Freddy vs. Jason is going to run on cable till the end of time.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So it's fucking, it's very flattering as someone who grew up on all this stuff to get to have gotten to do, this much.
I will say that Shoot 'Em Up is a very highly underrated movie, and
it's got a very nice fan base, man. I can't really complain. It's clearly built a nice little cult.
And I am one of them, and one of the members of that cult. Well, not cult, but I am one of the I am one of the big fans of that movie. It's because it seems to mash not only the video game like atmosphere, but it has this very, very goofy, like what you were saying before. It's not exactly high art, but it's like one of those movies that you just watch for like maybe 90 minutes or so. Enjoy yourself, just unwrap your mind. It has no.
I look at it as a comedy. I mean,
it is a good comedy.
When I watch horror movies a lot of the time, this is part of the reason why I don't relate to a lot of modern horror. I always liked horror movies because I would laugh at them. And I don't mean that as an insult, because I love this, but I'd laugh my ass off a lot of the time. That's half the fun. That was my cathartic way of dealing with horror. And I like it in action a lot. I just, I had the great honor of spending a year on set working with Dick Donner, the late, great Dick Donner, who just passed away, who was a real mentor to me. And one thing about Dick is go back and look at that guy's career. And I was talking about this with a mutual friend right after he passed away. Because I think I look at my own taste and the stuff I tried to do, and he really was an influence I didn't fully understand until later. Like The Omen, Superman, Lethal Weapon, Scrooge, just run the Twilight Zone, the Terror at 30,000 Feet. That's him. Runs the fucking gamut. Goonies.
Yeah.
Okay? Runs the gamut. Can do everything, but there is a sense of fun and a twinkle in the eye in everything he does that to me is that's movie magic. And those rare moments, and again, I've never gotten it all the way right, but every one of them's got a moment or two that to me capture those moments. I see that, that's what I look at. Again, those are what I take from those times in opening weekend where I would go theater hop, is watching a crowd react to in Shoot 'Em Up. There's a scene where you think he's run over the baby, and he's not.
Yes.
And seeing eyes going, oh my God, because by that point we've done enough crazy shit where audiences for a millisecond are willing to believe that we might, or the sex scene, which always got a big response.
Yeah.
Those are I look at those now as Dick Donner moments. And I think the fun is that I'm going to go off and do this movie at Sony, this exorcism movie in Spain, and the challenge there, given obviously Dick did The Omen, which we've certainly nodded to a little bit in it, is to try to find those moments again. And I do think that for anybody that watches this that's interested in filmmaking, Dick's filmography is really something to go and study and look at. If you want, very few filmmakers is fleet of foot to move within genres with the level of success, making classics at, you name the subgenre. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it's weird because Richard Donner, Steven Spielberg, and probably a few others have this very quality of just making movie magic. It doesn't matter what type of a few weeks ago I was.
You want to know why? And it ties in with what we've talked about. And I know this because Dick told me this story. So Spielberg calls Dick to try to get him to direct the Goonies.
Yeah.
And by this point, I don't know how Dick's in his 50s at this point, probably maybe in his 60s at this point, 50s, I think. And he had met his wife Lauren Schuler Donner on Lady Hawk, which is an underrated movie. If you've never seen it, and also the name of his boat. And Dick basically says to Spielberg, he's like, "Listen, this is a kid's adventure. I'm a 50-something, 60-year-old man. What? Why me?" And Spielberg said, "Dick, I need someone who can direct this movie that is a bigger kid than I am." And that's George Lucas, the people that find Guillermo's got this. The big kid piece of the longer they're able to hold on, it doesn't last forever. And I think Spielberg eventually lost it too. But when you have it, all right, John Carpenter, when you have it, okay, and John Carpenter's kid's a little more cynical, but it was there. We all know the filmmakers who had it. When you have it, like that childlike sense of, I had a boss, Tom Rothman, one of the smartest things I ever heard in Hollywood, said the way you know a movie star is when you see them on the big screen, when they smile, you smile. And that's fucking right. Think about every legitimate movie star who's a box office draw, legitimate, not fake movie star, legitimate draw, going back to silent movies. It's true. Iconic smiles almost. Tom Cruise, Will Smith, Julia Roberts, Humphrey Bogart, Bacall. Go through it's fucking true.
Yeah.
Sean Connery. It is true. And there is, these things that are primal. You can't necessarily quantify them. The people who can stay in touch with that while navigating the corporate bullshit, those are the good ones. Those are the filmmakers you got to support.
Now, you just mentioned Tom Rothman, and I know how long were you part of 20th Century Fox?
Was it Fox for basically a couple of years, and probably most notable at this point for bringing Deadpool over, which originally started with us. I cast Ryan in that role, so that's at this point probably my biggest contribution to the business in the box office. And that really started at New Line with Kevin Feige and I wanting to do Deadpool, and Deadpool was one of those where the rights were available, and basically. We were going to try to swing out of Blade Trinity and do it there. And then as it happened, when I jumped to Fox, I was able to bring it over. And ultimately, frankly, quit my job over it because I got really frustrated with what they had done. And I was like, no, don't do this. But it's proven correct. And now I'm working with Tom over at Sony on the Father Amorth movies. So it's hilarious how this stuff works. But I also it also speaks to why you try to maintain good relationships with people.
Oh yeah.
And even though I wanted to leave, I never badmouthed them. I always had positive things to say about my experience because Fox was like going to grad school. Fox was like, you can go. I love New Line. I will always be identified as a New Line guy, and that sort of renegade spirit. But you go to Fox and you would be like, this is a real movie studio. How they operate. New Line would take $40 million in a marketing budget, and they would spend it dipping and dunking using sort of, in football terms, like West Coast offense, short passes basically on cable television. They'd blanket cable. Fox would take the same $40 million and they would nuke American Idol once in a way that was more effective. I learned so much. I'm so grateful for my time. I enjoyed it. My argument with them was ultimately over you hired me to be the comic book guy, and now you're not listening to me on an important comic book thing, which I was proven correct on it. And by the way, to their credit, they have since said as much. But I learned more about okay. So give an example. So we're doing this movie now. And I gave this note, and it's funny because Steve Bursch, the head of the division that we're working with, was also at Fox back in the day, so he knows this. When you're developing these movies, you want to have 5 moments that are original or that are sort of for materials, trailer moments to put it in sort of layman's terms.
Yeah.
So there are 5 moments that are being pulled for every fucking trailer, every commercial, etc. So Wolverine, a lot of issues, but that Michael Jordan shot of him going into the helicopter was in every fucking spot, intentionally so. Okay, so it is, you look at Fox stuff of that era, or look at Sony now today, where Tom is now, you can find it as a general rule. Every studio has a variation of it. So those sort of lessons were not lessons you would get. At New Line, Like Fox allowed me to go run a movie on set, $160 million movie on set for the bulk of the year on no notice, basically, thrown right into that fire, and to get an experience that like none of my peers, most executives have not done that.
Yeah.
And so certainly at New Line, no, because that's just not how New Line was run.
Yeah.
So that was really, and also just like to get there and you're sitting there doing that at the knee of Dick Donner, like, come fucking on. Like, you gotta be kidding me. And we would go sit in his trailer, and like Dick hadn't seen Maverick since it had originally come out. And so Derek Hoffman, who worked for him, who's a great guy, and we grabbed dinner, sitting on Cockatoo Island in the middle of Australia in the middle of the night on night shoots. And we watched Maverick with him, and he gave us a running audio commentary live, and it was great. It was also a very underrated movie.
Oh, it is.
Very underrated movie. James Garner, spectacular in that movie. So I've been really lucky, man. I can't really complain, but I got about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. I got to start.
Oh, yeah. I was about to wrap it up anyway.
Sure.
So I only have like 3 more last questions. That's very, very obvious. First question, to those who are actually going into filmmaking or film or some sort of general sense of going into the film industry, what type of advice do you have, especially if they're just starting out, like say as a runner or like, like a runner or just like or a production assistant, that so forth and so on.
Right. It's a crazy time. It's never been crazier. It's going to only get crazier. I think just the reality is the world we live in is changing. How we consume our media is changing. So it's like, I used to, my buddy Sam Brown, who was an exec at New Line, who now is over at STX, we would speak together at USC at the Peter Stark producing program every year. And I would always, it was hilarious because he went to Harvard and I'm a college dropout. And it was a nice sort of counter of how ways. The point was there are no set rules, right? It's the Wild West.
Yeah.
That's only more so the case now. And frankly, like I would actually, I encourage people to not go to film school because the money you're going to spend on it, you could go make a movie at this point. Like, why would you do, you're going to make a movie, take that movie to AFM and start building a library, right?
Yeah.
So I would encourage people to embrace the Wild West element a little bit, but really practically speaking, cultivate a niche. In my case, I was sort of the genre, like every studio now has a Jeff Katz. There was a period where literally they'd be like, we need a Jeff Katz, which is fucking ridiculous to think of. But like that was actually said at places where I had garnered enough of a reputation as like, I get genre, I get comic books, I get Comic-Con, that audience, because I was authentically of them, right?
Yeah.
So every studio at a point, because of where the marketplace shifted, now needs someone who covers that space. So in my case, that was my niche, and it was true to who I was, but it also allowed me to expand beyond, to go to it. Like I had Dave Chappelle's first movie coming off Chappelle's show that he was going to do. Like I got to do other stuff well beyond, but like in politics, I won the primary by playing to my base, and then in the general, I moved to the middle. You can't move to the middle until you've captured the primary. And so whether it's comedy, horror, you want to be in theater, whatever the fuck it is, I would try to cultivate that niche originally as a starting point, build relationships in there, and then relationships are currency. So you want to maintain those relationships, and you never know where they're going to take you. It's not an accident that a lot of actors show up in the same people's stuff, or the crossovers. The world gets smaller and smaller as you move up through the business, as attrition sort of weeds people out. And so I think that's probably the smartest, most practical advice I can give to somebody, because it's achievable. Everyone's got a thing they're passionate about, or a thing that, like, figure out the business application of how to use that niche, because it's also going to give you credibility when you speak.
My second question relates back to the project we were just talking about. Do you have any upcoming projects that you talk about, not in like full detail, but just like a very short detail? Like this?
Absolutely. So it's pretty crazy. We ended up making a deal in partnership with the Vatican, no less, who have been very good partners, which is good. As a Jew, hilarious. I'm partnered with the Vatican, but they've been very good partners. And we are adapting the Gabriel Amorth series of books for Sony, which are, have sold millions of copies. And so the first movie, I believe, is going to end up being called The Pope's Exorcist. And I think
Hmm.
we are likely going to be shooting this. We are on pace to be shooting this summer in Spain. So the script is about a rewrite and polish away. We're all happy. Sony's happy. And it's a big priority for them because it's a, moderately priced genre piece. It's got a big role for an actor. And also has, I think we think some appeal, obviously, in sort of the Catholic and Latin speaking countries. And our hope is to be able to use it to do local language spin-offs, all sorts of stuff. Like our deal with them is both in film and TV. Sony's made a real sort of investment in the IP, and so I think we're all cautiously optimistic. But I think on pace right now, Michael Petroni is doing his rewrite, and we should have that in a few weeks. And then I think probably a polish, and we will be going to casting pretty quickly. We know basically who we want. So.
Oh yeah, of course. And I know that I forgot to mention this previously because when we were talking about wrestling, but you have a YouTube channel that you have been showing old bits and pieces.
Yeah, so you can go to the YouTube Wrestling Retribution archive, which has that. It's got the stuff I did from the Underground, and I will actually, because this is going to come out in October, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, within the span of like say next month or so. So
okay, cool. So by the time this comes out, because it will not have been announced yet, I'm going to be doing a big thing with the Reddit Squared Circle guys.
Yeah,
in a week or two to sort of a Q&A thing. But yes, with all the old libraries. So if anyone who's a fan of sort of that, it's relatively esoteric. But again, and I've done audio commentaries. You can see the matches straight up, but also some audio commentaries where I will talk a bit about the parallels in terms of developing for film and wrestling.
Yeah.
And in the case of the Underground, which was the secondary piece on there. So Brian Robbins, who was my partner on that, just got named chairman of Paramount. So
oh wow,
yeah. So it's another one of those where I've just been very lucky to have gotten to, in multiple worlds, work with some really talented people. And I think the older I get, the more I appreciate. You can't take it with you. And in a lot of ways, the things you leave behind are these experiences and the stuff that they've made. And so it's. I don't know. That's really a trouble. This is what happens, by the way, once you hit 40.
Yeah.
I got to start thinking about all of this crap now. It's horrifying.
Now, aside from the Wrestling Retribution project, aside from
that's up there, then the Underground as well.
Yeah. Aside from that, do you have any other social media that you do want to plug?
Not really. I don't really do social media anymore. I'm sort of sick of it. I'm kind of enjoying my low-key life for the most part. I have a Twitter that I almost never use. So no, there was a point when I was all into all this sort of shit, and I very quickly realized life is a lot. I'm becoming a Luddite in my old age at some level.
Yeah, I've noticed I'm starting to use social media less and less, but that may that may have been because we've been inside of our houses for a year or so. Then suddenly, I now have places to go, and I just don't want to document all this stuff.
I have to be honest with you. I don't envy you as someone who lived in New York and loves New York. I would not I've been in LA for all this. I've been outside the entire time. I would be so miserable stuck in New York during this. I do not envy you.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I talk my ex-girlfriend's still there, and I talk to her every day because we co-parent the dog. And she's one of those New York could be on fire in the middle of nuclear winter, and she's like, but it's the best nuclear winter in the world. And I go, you're crazy, crazy. LA's got a lot of issues and has its own problems,
and you're already going through a recall election just now.
Yes, in terms of which, frankly, is we'll see what happens. I suspect he'll survive, but in many ways is deserved as a long-term citizen here. We have a lot of problems.
All right, but on that note, Jeff, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, man. It's my pleasure doing it.
Of course, and take care, everyone. Please be safe and be well.